I was 28 years old when I realized my name had started disappearing. Not from documents yet, that would come later, but from something more painful. Conversations, stories, the tiny pieces of family history people tell when they think you're not listening. Suddenly it was always, Vanessa did this. Vanessa said that. Remember when Vanessa made Dad so proud? If I was mentioned at all, it was as a footnote. An afterthought. A complication. That evening, I stood in my father's dining room in the suburbs of Boston, watching the light fade outside the big bay window. It was early autumn, that strange in-between time when the air is cool but the sky still clings to summer's brightness. The street lights were blinking on, one by one, as if the neighborhood itself was preparing to look away from what was about to happen. Dad's house always felt like a museum of a life I was barely part of. Framed photos of Vanessa at every milestone. Cheerleading, prom, graduation. My photos existed too, just smaller. Off to the side. A school picture on a side table. A snapshot of me at 11, half cut off at the edge of a family barbecue. Tonight the table was set for 4. Dad, Vanessa, her husband Mark, and me. 4 plates. 4 glasses. 4 perfectly folded napkins. But the way Vanessa moved around the room made it clear. There were 3 people who mattered and 1 person who didn't. "Alexa, can you move?" she said, brushing past me without looking up. "It's Alex," I corrected quietly. "I've told you that 100 times. She paused just for a second and looked at me with that polished, polite smile she'd learned from her mother. The kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Right, Alex," she repeated as if it were an inconvenience. "Could you just not stand in the way? Dad gets tired easily." She walked off before I could answer. I stayed exactly where I was for a moment, my fingers gripping the back of a dining chair. Dad gets tired easily. As if I didn't know. As if I hadn't been the one sitting with him at 2 a.m. in a hospital room last month, listening to him talk in circles about the past and about how he never got it right with you, kiddo. I could still hear his voice, low and rough, over the hum of the machines. "There's something you should know, Alex. About Vanessa. About everything." He hadn't finished that night. A nurse had come in, the doctor followed, and the moment was swallowed by medical language and beeping monitors. But his eyes had been different when he'd looked at me after that. Sharper. As if he was finally seeing me. Now he shuffled in from the hallway, moving slower than he used to, his gray hair thinner, his skin pale. But his eyes, those familiar dark eyes, brightened when he saw me. "Hey kiddo," he said. "You made it." "Of course I made it," I replied, forcing a smile. "You invited me." Vanessa slid an arm around his shoulders, guiding him toward his usual seat at the head of the table, as if he couldn't sit down without her approval. "Dad shouldn't be stressed," she said, glancing at me. "Tonight needs to be calm." It was the way she said it, like I was the threat in the room. Something tightened in my chest. I took my seat at the end of the table, opposite from Vanessa, watching her arrange his pills next to his water glass like she owned the space. Maybe she thought she did. What none of them knew was that I was done being invisible. And somewhere between the soft clinking of silverware and the quiet tick of the clock on the wall, I decided, whatever Dad had been trying to tell me that night in the hospital, I was going to drag it into the light, even if it tore this family apart. The dinner table always revealed more truth than any family conversation. The way people cut their food, the pauses between sentences, the glances that lasted a little too long. That night in Boston, everything felt sharp-edged, like the silverware itself. Dad sat at the head of the table, his posture a little slumped, his breath slightly heavier than before. Vanessa had insisted on making her signature lemon herb chicken, because of course she had, and she hovered behind him, adjusting things he didn't ask her to adjust. His napkin, his water glass, the angle of the chair. Mark, her husband, sat to her right. A man who managed corporate budgets for a living but couldn't balance a single emotion on his face. He always looked vaguely uncomfortable around me, as if liking me would be a betrayal to Vanessa. I sat at the opposite end of the table, the guest chair. The one that didn't have a permanent place like the others. As we ate, the atmosphere felt thick, almost humid, as if the house's air conditioning had chosen that night to give up. Outside, the autumn wind shook the maple trees, sending dried leaves scattering across the lawn, tapping softly against the window like impatient fingers. "So," Vanessa began, her voice sweet in that artificial way honey tastes sweet when it's really just sugar. Alex, what are your plans these days? Plans. Not job, not life, not how have you been. Just plans. Neutral. Non-committal. Designed to sound polite while implying I didn't have much going on. I'm still working at the architecture firm, I said, cutting a piece of chicken. We're finishing a project downtown. The new community center. She blinked like she hadn't expected an actual answer. Right. I thought you were between things. No, I said simply. I'm good. Dad gave a small nod, almost proud or maybe relieved. Mark cleared his throat. Community centers are important, he said weakly, trying to contribute something. Vanessa shot him a glare and he immediately looked down at his plate. Then she turned her smile back on me. Well, that's nice. It wasn't a compliment. It was dismissal wrapped in velvet. Dad set down his fork. Vanessa, don't do that. Do what? She asked, still smiling. That tone, he said, shrinking slightly as he spoke. She's doing good work. Vanessa's smile stiffened, the slightest crack. Dad, I wasn't. He cut her off, a rarity these days. Just don't. Silence stretched across the table, long and brittle. I swallowed hard, unsure why the defense hurt as much as the insult. Maybe because it reminded me that our father was sick. Sick enough to speak truths he usually swallowed. Then Vanessa leaned back, folding her arms. Honestly, Dad, I just want what's best for you. And that means keeping things calm. Stable. Her eyes flicked to me. My pulse quickened. I'm not here to cause trouble. I didn't say you were, she replied smoothly. But you haven't exactly been around. There was the first strike. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa. No, Dad, someone needs to say it, she continued. You need consistency. You need people you can rely on. And I'm not one of those people? Asked my voice low. She tilted her head. You come and go, Alex. That's all. My throat tightened. She didn't know, she never knew, about the appointments I drove him to, the nights I sat in hospital chairs, the quiet moments where he'd confessed regrets he never told her. The truth pushed at my chest, begging to be spoken. Instead, Dad spoke first. Alex has been here more than you think, he said, his voice cracking. And there's something I need to talk to both of you about. Vanessa froze. Mark stopped chewing mid-bite. And my heart dropped into my stomach. Because I knew whatever he was about to say, this was the beginning of the end of Vanessa's perfect plan. Dad's words hung in the air like a draft from an open window, cold, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. There's something I need to talk to both of you about. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the refrigerator's hum seemed to fade. Vanessa straightened her spine, her expression tightening into the poised, camera-ready version of herself she always used when control slipped from her hands. Dad, she said gently, you don't need to stress yourself tonight. We can talk another time. He shook his head. No. I've waited long enough. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. Not the trembling of age but of nerves. I knew the difference. I'd seen him calm in hospital beds and rattled during ordinary conversations. Something about tonight was different. Vanessa forced a soft laugh. Dad, come on. You're tired. Let's just enjoy dinner. He didn't laugh. I'm not tired. I'm trying to tell you something important. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me. His voice dropped. Something I should have said years ago. A slow, sinking feeling crawled through me. Vanessa sensed the shift too, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. She placed a hand on his forearm, squeezing gently, the way she always did when she wanted to redirect him without appearing controlling. Dad, whatever it is, I'm sure it can wait until you're feeling better. He pulled his arm away. That had never happened before. Vanessa blinked, stunned. Mark looked from one of us to the other, the human equivalent of a buffering screen. I set down my fork, my chest tightening. Dad, I said softly, you can say it. He nodded, but before he could speak, he coughed, a dry, hard cough that bent him forward. Water spilled. Vanessa sprang up. See? He's exhausted, she snapped. This is exactly why we shouldn't do this tonight. But Dad raised a shaking hand, signaling her to stop. Enough, Vanessa. She froze. He never spoke to her that way. His breathing steadied and he leaned back in his chair, eyes glassy but determined. Both of you need to know the truth, he said. About the family. About your mother. About how everything really happened. Vanessa's face went pale, not confused pale but terrified pale. As if she already knew where this was going. My heart pounded. This was it. The moment he tried to share in the hospital. The moment that had been cut off. The truth he said would change everything. But then, the doorbell rang. A loud, sharp chime that sliced through the tension like a knife. Everyone jolted. Vanessa stared at the doorway, jaw clenched. Who the hell? Dad exhaled shakily. I invited someone. Vanessa's head snapped toward him. You what? He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes as if the decision was too heavy to keep explaining. I stood up slowly. I'll get it. Vanessa was already moving. No, she hissed. I'll handle it. She reached the front hallway first, heels clacking against the hardwood floor. The rest of us listened as she opened the door. Then a voice, a woman's voice, drifted into the dining room. Soft, steady, familiar in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. Hello, Vanessa. It's been a long time. Silence. Stone-dead silence. I walked toward the hallway and when I turned the corner I froze. Standing at the door was a woman I had only seen in old, faded photographs. A woman I thought had disappeared forever. A woman whose name was etched into the deepest cracks of our family's past. Dad's first wife. Vanessa's mother. The woman who was never supposed to come back. Vanessa stood frozen in the doorway like she'd seen an apparition. And in a way she had. Her mother, Elaine, looked almost unreal standing under the porch light. Older than in the photos, of course, but still carrying that unmistakable mix of elegance and fragility. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned back neatly, her clothes simple but tasteful, her eyes, those sharp blue eyes Vanessa inherited, scanning the hallway with a calm that felt almost strategic. Mom. Vanessa whispered. But it wasn't joy. It was a tremor of fear, disbelief, and something darker, something defensive. Elaine stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. You weren't expecting me, she said gently. No, Vanessa said, voice tight. Dad didn't tell me anything. He didn't tell you a lot of things, Elaine replied, her gaze shifting briefly toward the dining room. I felt the air change when she looked at me. Not hostile, just aware. As if she'd been waiting to see me. I cleared my throat. Hi, Alex, she finished. I know. The way she said it made my chest tighten. Did she know about me all along? Vanessa turned back toward Dad's voice calling from the dining room. Elaine, he said weakly. Is that you? She walked toward him slowly, each step echoing through the quiet house. When she reached him, he looked up with a mixture of guilt and relief, like a man finally facing a truth he'd buried too deep. Thank you for coming, he murmured. I came because you asked, she answered quietly. And because it's time. Vanessa's jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard her teeth grind. Time for what? She demanded, crossing her arms. Mom, what is this? What are you doing here? Elaine turned to her daughter, voice softening. Nessa. Don't Nessa me, Vanessa snapped. You left. You left and never came back. And now suddenly you show up because Dad invited you? For what? Drama? Mark stepped forward as if to intervene, but then thought better of it and retreated. Elaine took a breath, steadying herself. I came back because there are truths you deserve to hear. Both of you. Truths. Vanessa laughed sharply. What truths? That Dad cheated? That he destroyed our family? Dad flinched visibly. Elaine closed her eyes as if bracing herself. Vanessa, it wasn't like that. Really? Vanessa spat. Then tell me. Tell me why you left. Tell me why you stayed gone for 20 years. Elaine looked at her daughter with an expression full of sorrow, and something I didn't recognize. Because, she whispered, I wasn't the one who left. The room fell silent. Vanessa blinked, confused. What are you talking about? Dad opened his mouth, but Elaine gently touched his hand, stopping him. I'll say it, she told him. My pulse thudded in my ears. Elaine turned toward me. Alex, she said, I know how hard your life has been with this family treating you like an outsider. Vanessa whipped around, eyes blazing. What does he have to do with this? Elaine inhaled deeply. Everything. She looked at me with a raw honesty that made my spine straighten. Your father and I separated because of a secret we both agreed never to reveal. A secret about Alex. A secret that, if Vanessa had known, it would have changed the entire family. Vanessa stared at me, horror blooming in her expression. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "what secret?" Elaine swallowed. "Vanessa, Alex isn't who you think they are." My stomach dropped. Dad lowered his head, covering his face with one shaking hand. And I knew, whatever was coming next would tear the floor out from under all of us. For a few seconds nobody moved. The only sound in the dining room was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, each second marking the countdown to whatever truth was about to break everything open. Vanessa's face had gone pale, her confidence cracking like thin ice. "Mom, what do you mean Alex isn't who I think they are?" "He's my..." She stopped as if the words suddenly felt too fragile to touch. Elaine took a slow breath. "Vanessa, your father and I separated because of a truth that involved both of us, and Alex. And we knew that if you grew up knowing it, it could change the way you saw yourself. The way you saw the family." Vanessa blinked rapidly. "This isn't making any sense." I swallowed hard. My hands were cold, my pulse heavy. "Just say it," I whispered. Elaine turned toward me, and her eyes softened with something I didn't expect: regret. "Alex," she said quietly, "you aren't the mistake or the accident, or the second family your father created after leaving us. You were before." A shiver ran up my spine. "Before what?" Dad's voice cracked as he finally spoke. "Before Vanessa." Vanessa's entire body jolted. No, that's not. Alex is younger than me." "He's..." Elaine interrupted softly. "He's younger, because we gave him up." The room tilted. "What?" Vanessa whispered, stepping back as if she'd been hit. "Gave him up." Elaine nodded, her shoulders trembling. "When I was 23, your father and I were barely surviving. Too young, too unstable. I became pregnant before we were ready. We didn't have money, support, or even a real home. We made a decision, a terrible one, that we would regret for the rest of our lives." Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "We let Alex be adopted by a distant relative. We thought it was best." My throat closed. The words sounded like someone else's story, not mine. Elaine continued, voice breaking. "But the adoption wasn't official. It fell apart. And your father brought Alex back. Quietly. Secretly. After you were born, Vanessa." Vanessa stared at me, eyes wide, breath shaking. That's impossible. Why wouldn't you tell me? Why wouldn't you tell anyone?" Elaine looked at her daughter with a pained expression. "Because we were afraid. Afraid of how the truth would affect you, your identity, your sense of place. We made mistakes, Vanessa. Big ones." "But you replaced me with him," Vanessa whispered, tears gathering. "Didn't you? You left us because..." "No," Elaine said firmly. "Your father and I separated because hiding Alex destroyed us. We couldn't agree on how to fix it. I wanted to bring him home openly. Your father couldn't face what people would say." Dad lowered his head again. "A man drowning in guilt. And when we finally separated," Elaine went on, "your father took Alex with him. Not because he loved you less, but because he thought you needed stability. You were 3. You were attached to me. And Alex, he needed someone." My breath trembled. The truth felt like fire spreading through the room, touching every memory, every grudge, every moment I'd felt like I didn't belong. Vanessa shook her head, tears falling. "So all these years, all this resentment, all the times I thought he replaced our family with another." She looked at me, heartbreak etched across her face. "It wasn't like that?" "No," Elaine whispered. "The truth is, Alex wasn't brought into this family after it fell apart. He was part of the reason it fell apart. And none of it was his fault." My hands trembled under the table. Dad finally looked up, eyes red. "I should have told you both. I should have fixed this decades ago." The truth sat heavy in the room, reshaping everything. Vanessa stood there, shattered, not from betrayal, but from the realization that the story she'd built her entire identity around was never real. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Not one. Vanessa wasn't someone who broke easily. All her life she had been the strong one, the put-together one, the daughter who never let her mascara run or her posture loosen. But in that moment, standing in the center of our father's dining room, She looked like someone who'd just been pushed out of her own skin. Her breathing hitched. She turned away, then back again, pacing 2 steps before stopping as if afraid the floor might disappear beneath her. "So all this time," she whispered, her voice cracking, "all this time you lied to me. About our family. About why you left. About everything." Elaine reached out a cautious hand. "Vanessa's sweetheart. Don't." Vanessa flinched away, eyes wild. "You don't get to call me that. You don't get to comfort me." She stared at her mother as if trying to recognize her. "You left me. And now I'm supposed to believe it wasn't because of Alex." Elaine blinked slowly, sadness carved into every line of her face. "I didn't leave you. I left the marriage. I never left you. You were just too young to understand the difference." Vanessa's voice rose, trembling. "You never came back." "I wasn't allowed to," Elaine whispered. "Your father said he needed space. He said it would confuse you." She hesitated, glancing at Dad. "And I was ashamed. Of the choices we made. Of the pain we caused Alex. I didn't know how to fix any of it." Dad bowed his head as if bracing himself for the weight of her words. I watched Vanessa's eyes flick between them, between the parents who had shaped her entire reality, and I saw something shift inside her. Anger, confusion, fear, grief. All mixing into a storm she didn't know how to weather. "And you," she said suddenly, rounding on me. "What did you know?" I stiffened. "Nothing," I said honestly. "Not until last month. Dad tried to tell me." He cut me off. "And you didn't think to ask questions? You didn't think maybe you were the reason?" "Vanessa," I said firmly, "I didn't know. I didn't take anything from you." Her laugh was sharp, painful. "Didn't you? You took my father's attention. His guilt. His time. His love." I inhaled slowly. "You think I wanted that? You think I enjoyed being treated like a reminder of their mistakes?" She blinked hard, tears spilling. "You were always there," she whispered. "Every time he didn't show up for something of mine. Every time he looked distracted. Every fight he had with Mom. You were the shadow behind everything." Her voice softened, cracking. "I grew up thinking he abandoned us for you." The words hit me like a blow. Not because they were cruel, but because of the pain behind them. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, "for what you went through. But I didn't choose any of this." The room fell silent again, thick with emotions too heavy to name. Elaine stepped toward Vanessa, her voice trembling. "I came back to fix things. Not to break you." Vanessa shook her head, tears streaming now. "I don't even know who I am anymore. Everything I believed about my childhood, my family, my place in the world." She pressed a hand to her chest. "Was it all a lie?" Dad tried to speak. "Vanessa." She lifted a trembling hand. Just don't right now." Then she turned and walked toward the hallway, but she didn't run. She carried herself slowly, like every step was being taken through deep water. When she reached the front door, she stopped, one hand on the doorknob, her back rising and falling with uneven breaths. "I need air," she whispered. And without another word, she stepped outside, letting the door close softly behind her. The house suddenly felt too big. Too quiet. Elaine wiped a tear from her cheek. "She'll come back," she murmured. Dad looked at the door with a hollow expression. "Only if we tell her the rest." My stomach twisted. The rest? What else could there be? For a long moment after Vanessa stepped outside, none of us spoke. The house felt hollow, like someone had pulled all the oxygen out and left us breathing memory instead of air. Dad leaned back in his chair, his face pale and exhausted. Elaine hovered beside him, unsure whether she still had the right to touch him. I stood near the doorway, frozen between wanting answers and being terrified of what the rest might mean. Finally, Dad exhaled shakily. "I should have told both of you a long time ago. I thought I was protecting you, but I made everything worse." Elaine's voice was soft but steady. "Richard, they deserve the truth. All of it." He nodded, blinking slowly, the kind of blinking people do when they're choosing between the past and the present and not liking either choice. I took a step closer. "What truth, Dad?" He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time in years I saw the father I remembered from my childhood. The one who used to lift me onto his shoulders during 4th of July fireworks. The one who whispered stories to help me sleep. The one who made mistakes but loved fiercely. "There's something important about your birth," he said. "Something we hid from everyone, including you." My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Elaine folded her hands, her voice trembling slightly. When I became pregnant the first time, we weren't ready. But it wasn't just the timing. There were people in our family, on my side, who thought I shouldn't continue the pregnancy. Dad clenched his jaw. Her parents, her brothers, they made her feel ashamed, pressured her, threatened to cut her off. Elaine nodded, closing her eyes as if reliving a wound. They wanted me to terminate. The word came out barely above a whisper. But I refused. I wanted you. Even when I was terrified. My heart pounded. So you gave me up because of them? No, she said quickly, opening her eyes. We left them. We cut ties and tried to start our own life. But we were struggling financially, one paycheck from homelessness. I got sick during the pregnancy. Your father was working 3 jobs. We had no insurance, no help, and no safe place to live. Dad rubbed his forehead. We didn't give you up because we didn't want you. We gave you up because we were drowning. Elaine's voice cracked. And when the adoption fell through, your father brought you back. But by then, our marriage was breaking under the weight of everything. I blamed myself. He blamed himself. And we both held on to guilt we never let go. I swallowed hard. So Vanessa, she never knew any of this? Dad shook his head. We wanted to tell her when she was older. But then she started seeing me as the parent who left. And I didn't want to be the one to break her heart again. Elaine looked toward the door where Vanessa had walked out. She built her whole identity around being the firstborn daughter of the right marriage. If she had known you came before her, that you were our first child, she might have felt threatened, replaced, unstable. The realization washed over me like cold water. She wasn't trying to erase me out of cruelty, I whispered. She was trying to protect the story she grew up believing. Elaine nodded. Her entire sense of belonging depended on it. Dad's face tightened with sorrow. I should have told her. I should have told both of you. Instead, she grew up resenting someone who never did anything to her. The truth settled into my bones, heavy, aching. But within that truth, a darker pattern emerged. Vanessa had spent her life defending a version of the family that never existed. And when reality cracked open tonight, she wouldn't handle it quietly. Elaine touched my arm gently. You need to understand something, Alex. If Vanessa feels threatened enough, she won't just be hurt. She met my eyes. She will fight. I felt the weight of her words deep in my chest. Because I already knew what Elaine couldn't bring herself to say. Vanessa wasn't outside clearing her head. She was recalculating. And whatever she came back with wouldn't be forgiveness. The house was unnervingly silent after Vanessa stepped outside. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but expectant. Heavy, like the still air before a thunderstorm. Dad sat slumped in his chair, drained. Elaine paced near the window, wiping at her eyes. I stood by the edge of the dining room, staring at the front door as if it were the stage where the next disaster would enter. It didn't take long. The doorknob turned. Vanessa stepped back inside. But she wasn't the same woman who had walked out just minutes earlier. Her tears were gone. Her breathing was steady. Her posture rigid, almost regal, like someone who had rebuilt their armor outside on the porch. Her eyes swept over all of us, cold, calculating, wounded in ways she refused to show. Elaine took a careful step forward. Vanessa's sweetheart. Don't, Vanessa said sharply, her voice a perfect slice of ice. I don't want sympathy. I want answers. Dad straightened slightly. We've told you the truth. No, she said. You told me a truth. The one you've rehearsed. The one that makes you both look like tragic heroes. Elaine's face fell. That isn't fair. Nothing about this is fair, Vanessa snapped. I grew up thinking I was the glue that kept this family together. The firstborn daughter. The one who came from a real marriage. And now you're telling me I was... what? The second chance. The redo. Dad shook his head quickly. No, Vanessa. You were never a replacement. Spare me. She turned toward me then, her gaze sharpened. And you just stood there and let them explain it like it was some sad romance story. My pulse found a faster rhythm. I didn't know any of this. She took a step closer. But you knew something. Dad started telling you before he told me. That wasn't. You think I don't see what's happening? She said, her voice lowering. You've always wanted more than what you had in this family. More attention. More validation. Now you think this truth makes you legitimate. I felt the sting even though I knew it wasn't true. I never asked for legitimacy. I wanted honesty. That's all. Vanessa laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was bitterness with a pulse. Honesty? You want honesty? He turned to Dad and Elaine. Fine. Here's honesty. You destroyed my childhood and now you're destroying my identity. Elaine's voice cracked. Vanessa, please. She pointed at her mother without looking at her. You left and never came back. Then she pointed at Dad. You lied every day for 20 years. And then she pointed at me. And you were the threat I didn't even know existed. I exhaled slowly. Vanessa, I'm not your enemy. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of the sister we could have been. The one buried under expectations, lies, and silent wounds. But the flicker disappeared. Her voice dropped into something dark. Maybe you're not my enemy, she said. But you're standing in the place I thought was mine. Elaine stepped toward her. Your place isn't threatened. No one wants to take anything from you. Vanessa shook her head. You don't understand. Everything in my life, every choice, every sacrifice, was built on the foundation of who I thought I was. And now because of you, she shot a glance at me, that foundation is gone. Dad opened his mouth, but Vanessa raised a hand. I'm not staying here for more explanations. I'm leaving before I say something I can't take back. She turned toward the door, grabbing her purse. But don't think this is over. The truth changes everything. And I'm not going to let my life fall apart because of a secret you kept. She pulled the door open, pausing only to throw one last look over her shoulder. Not tearful, not confused. Determined. I'll call you, she said to Dad, though the words sounded more like a warning than a promise. Then she stepped out into the night, the door shutting behind her with a quiet, definitive click. Elaine collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking. Dad stared at the door, eyes hollow. And I felt the shift deep in my bones. Vanessa wasn't just hurt. She was preparing for war. The night after the confrontation was strangely quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace. It only makes you listen harder. Dad and Elaine had gone home separately, each carrying their own ghosts. I returned to my apartment downtown, a small, minimalist space overlooking the Boston skyline. Normally, the view calmed me. The lights on the Charles River, the hum of the city, the soft glow of traffic far below. But that night, I sat on the edge of my bed knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Vanessa wasn't done. Hurt people lash out. Threatened people plot. And Vanessa had always been both. Around 11:40 p.m. my phone buzzed. I expected a friend or a late email from work. I didn't expect this. A message from Dad's attorney, Mr. Stafford. Alex, I need to speak with you at your earliest convenience. Something has come up regarding your father's estate planning. Estate planning. My stomach dropped. Dad wasn't dying, not immediately, but his health was fragile. And any mention of estate planning at midnight meant only one thing. Vanessa had already made a move. I typed back. What happened? Another buzz. This time a voicemail from Stafford. I pressed play. His voice was strained, uncomfortable. Alex, your sister Vanessa contacted me tonight requesting urgent modifications to your father's will and medical directives. She claimed your father authorized it. She also insisted all decision-making rights should be transferred to her alone. I refused without direct confirmation from your father, but she was extremely persistent. I think you need to be aware of this. My chest tightened. I replayed one sentence in my head. All decision-making rights transferred to her alone. That wasn't grief. That wasn't confusion. That was strategy. I grabbed my coat and keys, heading toward the door. I didn't even fully know where I was going yet. To Dad? To Vanessa? To Stafford? But before I left, another notification appeared on my phone. This time was from Dad. A text. Short. Unsteady. Alex. Vanessa came by just now. She's upset. Okay. Don't worry. Which meant she had confronted him after leaving the house. She hadn't calmed down. She had access to him. Too much access. I called him immediately. No answer. I tried again. Voicemail. The unease in my chest grew claws. As I reached the garage, the wind outside picked up, hissing between the concrete walls. Boston had that kind of wind, sharp, urgent, foreboding. The kind that made you pull your jacket tighter without thinking. I got into my car, but before I could start the engine, another message came in. This one from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. A single sentence. Polished. Vanessa, you should learn your place before this gets uglier. My breath stopped. No threats. No emotions. Just a promise. The interior of the car felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. The lights flickered as another gust of wind swept through the garage. I stared at the message again, the words vibrating with unspoken meaning. Learn your place. She thought the truth had stolen hers. She was wrong. But her next move wouldn't be emotional. It would be calculated. I looked through the windshield, the city glowing in the distance like something alive, restless. I whispered into the empty car. What are you planning, Vanessa? Because deep down I already knew. This wasn't just a sibling rivalry. This was the opening move in a family war. A war where truth wasn't just a weapon. It was the battlefield. By the next morning, the uneasy silence had settled into something heavier. Something that felt more permanent. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Vanessa walking into Dad's house, calm and calculated, rewriting the narrative with the confidence of someone who'd done it before. Around 8:20 a.m. my phone rang again. This time it was Mr. Stafford, and the urgency in his voice sent a chill through my spine. Alex, he said, not bothering with greetings. Your sister has escalated things. Of course she had. I'm on my way, I said, grabbing my jacket. No, listen first, he insisted. She filed a petition this morning to become your father's temporary conservator. I stopped in the middle of my apartment. She what? He sighed. She claims your father is mentally unfit to make decisions and that you are manipulating him. I closed my eyes. There it was. The first official strike. And, Stafford continued, she has submitted a statement, quite passionately written, asserting that you have a history of unstable behavior and financial desperation. My jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. Yes, he agreed. But the court doesn't know that. I grabbed my keys and headed for the elevator. She's doing this because I'm the threat now. Alex, he said calmly, she's doing this because she's terrified. And terrified people do reckless things. The elevator doors opened and I stepped in. But she wants me gone, I said quietly. Not just from the will. From Dad's life. Yes, he admitted. That's the implication. The words hung between us. I drove straight to Stafford's downtown office, weaving through Boston traffic, my thoughts racing. The sky was gray and heavy with fog, the kind that blurred buildings into tall, ghostly shapes. Inside the polished glass building, Stafford met me with a stack of papers in hand. These are copies of everything she filed, he said, laying them out on the conference table. Read them carefully. I sat down. The first page hit me like a punch to the gut. Petition for temporary conservatorship. Petitioner, Vanessa Reed. Below that, in black and white text, respondent's son, Alex Reed, exhibiting manipulative tendencies, emotional instability, and exhibiting concerning motives regarding estate access. I scoffed out loud, bitter. I've never touched a cent of his money. Stafford nodded. We know that. But Vanessa is painting a narrative. And narratives matter. My hands shook as I flipped to the next page. Her personal statement. Her handwriting. Her voice. Her strategy. She wrote about Dad's mental confusion. She wrote about finding him disoriented, which was really just exhaustion. She wrote that I was pressuring him emotionally and reappearing suddenly to influence legal decisions. Every line was a thread pulling me out of the picture. But one sentence froze me cold. My father confided in me that Alex's presence has become overwhelming and unpredictable. What? I whispered. He never said that. Stafford looked at me with sympathy. She's bending the truth to create doubt. I swallowed hard. This wasn't panic. This wasn't grief. This was precision. This is who she becomes when she feels powerless, I murmured. Stafford leaned forward. Alex, you need to understand something. She isn't simply trying to limit your involvement. She is building a case to remove you entirely from your father's life. My jaw clenched. Erase me. That was always the goal. But before I could say another word, my phone buzzed with a new message. From Dad. Only 2 words. Need help. Everything inside me froze. I stood up so fast the chair screeched across the floor. I'm going to him, I said. Stafford didn't try to stop me. As we both knew, whatever Vanessa had planned next, it was already unfolding. I drove straight to Dad's house, breaking every speed limit between downtown and the suburbs. The fog had thickened, swallowing the morning sun and turning the world into a muted, gray version of itself. Every street felt narrower, every intersection sharper. When I turned onto his street, I felt it immediately. Something was wrong. Dad's house, the familiar 2-story colonial with the faded blue shutters, felt off. The lights were on even though he never turned them on this early. The curtains were half drawn as if someone had pulled them shut in a hurry. I parked crookedly in the driveway and rushed to the front door. Before I knocked, I heard voices inside. Not arguing. Not shouting. Something worse. Vanessa's voice. Controlled. Cut from ice. Dad's voice. Weak. Strained. A man cornered in his own home. I didn't knock. I walked in. Dad sat on the couch in the living room, hands trembling slightly, his hair uncombed, his breathing shallow. He looked smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves were shrinking around him. Vanessa stood in front of him, arms crossed, posture rigid, the stance of someone who wasn't visiting but occupying. Her eyes shot to me the moment I stepped inside. Well, she said, look who came running. I ignored her and went straight to Dad. What happened? You texted me. Dad reached for my hand, his fingers cold. She came early. She said I needed help. That I wasn't safe alone. I'm not letting you spiral, Vanessa snapped. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. You collapse one more time and... I didn't collapse, he said, his voice barely audible. She waved a dismissive hand. You fell asleep sitting up, same thing. I knelt beside him. Are you okay? He nodded, but his eyes flicked toward Vanessa with the same fear a wounded animal gives a predator hovering nearby. Vanessa crossed her arms harder. He's confused, Alex. He needs someone responsible. Someone stable. You mean someone you can control, I said quietly. He stiffened. That's not what this is. Then what is it? I asked. She looked me dead in the eyes, and for the first time, I saw the full extent of her fear. Not trembling or frantic, but weaponized. This is me fixing the mess you brought into this family. Before I could respond, she turned back to Dad, slipping into a rehearsed voice. Soft, patronizing, practiced. Dad, remember what we talked about last night? About needing to make decisions before things get worse. He flinched. Vanessa, please. Stop pushing. Her jaw tightened. I'm not pushing. I'm protecting you. I'm trying to prevent manipulation. Manipulation, I said, stepping forward. He called me Vanessa. He said he needed help. And that's exactly what concerns me, she said, as if she were explaining something obvious. He doesn't know what he needs. And you're taking advantage of that confusion. Dad's voice trembled. Vanessa, that's enough. She ignored him. I filed the papers, she said. By this afternoon, the court will review them. And if they approve, I'll have temporary conservatorship. Dad shook his head desperately. No, I don't want that. His voice wasn't strong, but it was clear. Vanessa didn't even blink. It's not your choice anymore. Silence. Cold, dense, unbreathable. I stepped between them. You're not doing this out of love. Her eyes narrowed. Don't pretend you know anything about love. I know it doesn't look like this. She took a slow, steady breath. The kind someone takes when they're about to move from emotional attack to legal assault. What's happening now, she said, her voice sharp and calm, is that I'm taking control before this family falls apart. I shook my head. No. You're taking control because you can't stand that you weren't the first truth. Something flashed in her eyes, a rare, unguarded moment of visceral hurt. Then it was gone. I'm not losing my place, she whispered. Not to you. Not to the past. And not to a truth that should have stayed buried. Dad clutched my wrist. Alex, don't let her. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. This was no longer about the past. It was a battle for the present. And for Dad's future. Vanessa stepped back toward the doorway, picking up her bag. I'll be back this afternoon, she said. With paperwork. And then she looked directly at me. "Alex," she said softly, "you've already lost. You just don't know it yet." She walked out, closing the door as calmly as if she'd been leaving a brunch, not a battlefield she'd just claimed. Dad leaned against me, shaking. And I finally understood. Vanessa wasn't trying to erase me from the will. She was trying to erase me from existence. Starting with the person who loved us both. After Vanessa left, the house felt hollow, as if she had taken all the warmth with her and replaced it with cold tension. Dad leaned on me, exhausted, his breathing uneven. I helped him sit more comfortably on the couch, but even then he seemed too small for the space around him. "She can't do this," I said softly. Dad closed his eyes, his fingers tightening around mine. "I'm scared, Alex." His voice was so fragile it almost broke me. "I don't want her in charge," he whispered. "Not like this. Not when she's angry." "I won't let it happen," I promised. He nodded weakly, but it didn't feel like reassurance was enough. Dad had always been the anchor in this family. Flawed, imperfect, but steady. Now he was drifting, and Vanessa was trying to pull everything down with him. "I need to call someone," I said, helping him lie back with a blanket. "I'll be right here." I stepped into the kitchen and dialed Stafford again. He answered immediately. "Alex. You were right," I said. "She's already trying to take over. She came to the house this morning and," my voice tightened, "she's not giving him a choice." There was a pause on the other end. "Then we need to act fast." "What do we do?" "First," he said, "we need a medical evaluation confirming your father is still capable of making his own decisions. If a doctor signs off, Vanessa's petition will collapse before it even reaches the judge." I grabbed a pen and scribbled notes on the back of a grocery list. "Hey, I'll take him to his doctor today." "No," Stafford said firmly. "If Vanessa sees you leaving the house with him, she'll use it against you. She'll say you're dragging him around in a weakened state. We need a home visit from a licensed physician, someone neutral. That'll take time." "Not as much time as losing the conservatorship battle," he replied. I closed my eyes. "Call whoever you need. I'll cover any cost." "I already made the call," Stafford said. "The doctor can be there in 2 hours." Relief washed through me. "Thank you." "But Alex," his tone shifted. "Vanessa won't let today pass quietly. Be prepared." I hung up and returned to the living room. Dad was half asleep, staring at the muted TV, though I doubted he was watching anything. I sat beside him. "Dad, a doctor's coming soon. To evaluate you." He blinked slowly. "Am I losing my mind, Alex?" I took his hand. "No. You're just tired. Overwhelmed. But you're still capable. You're still here." He smiled faintly. "You always see me." My throat tightened. "Of course I do." The clock ticked quietly. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old memories. Outside, the fog thinned, sunlight pushing through in pale streaks. For a brief moment, the world felt still. But peace never lasts long when someone is actively trying to destroy it. At exactly 12:14 p.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I peered through the curtain. A silver SUV. Vanessa's. She stepped out, wearing a blazer this time. Polished, composed, ready for court even if she wasn't physically walking into one. She was here for one reason. To take control before the doctor arrived. The front door rattled once. Then again. Dad stiffened. "She's back." I stood up, every muscle tightening. "I've got it," I said. As I walked toward the door, I knew this moment was different from every confrontation before. This time she wasn't here to argue. She was here to win. No matter what. Or who. She had to destroy to get there. The knocking on the front door wasn't polite or hesitant. It was sharp. Demanding. The kind of knock that said, "I'm coming in whether you want me to or not." Dad flinched at the sound, gripping the blanket with trembling hands. I stepped between him and the hallway, bracing myself before opening the door. Vanessa stood on the porch, chin raised, her blazer stiff with determination. Behind her, the fog had thinned into a cold morning glare, giving her silhouette an even sharper edge. "Move," she said, not bothering with a greeting. "No," I replied, calm but firm. Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't your house. And it's not yours either. Dad decides who comes in." She let out a small, incredulous breath, half laugh, half disbelief. Dad is in no condition to make decisions. Which is exactly why I'm here. I crossed my arms. You're here because you want control. No, she snapped. I'm here because someone has to be responsible. Someone who isn't using him for emotional leverage and sudden, convenient affection. My jaw tightened. I've never used Dad. Please, she scoffed. You swoop in, play devoted son for a month, and suddenly you think you deserve equal footing? You don't. You never did. Her voice shook slightly, not with fear but with the kind of anger that grows from deep insecurity. I didn't move. You're not coming in. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Alex, you don't know what you're dealing with. I've handled Dad's life for years. Bills, appointments, medications, emergencies. I've been the responsible one. I built this family after Mom left. I blinked, stunned by the rawness in her voice. Vanessa, I said quietly, you didn't build a family. You survived one. Her jaw clenched and for a moment, pain flickered behind her eyes. Then she shoved it down, sealing it away behind anger. I'm not doing this with you, she said, voice sharpening. Dad needs care and I'm not waiting for him to spiral while you pretend to be the hero. He tried to step past me. I blocked her path. What part of no don't you understand? I said. She stared at me like she couldn't believe I was actually resisting her. Then her voice dropped to a cold whisper. Alex, if you don't let me in right now, I will call the police and tell them you're preventing me from seeing my father and interfering with his safety. They will side with me. And you know it. My stomach twisted. He wasn't bluffing. Behind me I heard Dad's weak voice. Alex, who's there? Vanessa's eyes flicked toward him. Dad? That it's me. I need to come in, okay? Honey, you need help. Honey. The word sounded wrong. Coded in manipulation. I stepped aside just enough to see him. He looked terrified. No, he said louder than before. Vanessa, not now. I need rest. Please. Vanessa froze. That was not the answer she expected. Her face flushed with embarrassment, anger rising like a tide she could barely control. Dad, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. You don't know what you're saying. You're confused. I'm tired, he said firmly. His voice, though faint, cut through the tension. Vanessa inhaled sharply, blinking back sudden tears. I'm trying to help you, she whispered. You're trying to control me, he replied. Her face crumbled for a brief second. A glimpse of the child who once needed everything to be stable because she'd watched her world collapse too young. But the crack disappeared quickly. She straightened her spine, icy composure returning. You're making a mistake, she said. Both of you. I held the door firmly, refusing to waver. He took one step back. I'll be at the courthouse in an hour, she said. When the judge calls, remember this moment. Her eyes met mine, pure fire and fury. You will regret standing in my way. Then she turned and walked toward her car, heels clicking sharply across the concrete, each step echoing like a declaration of war. The door shut behind me, the house suddenly too quiet, too small, too filled with the echo of all the words we didn't say. Dad leaned back, breath trembling. Alex, she's not stopping. I nodded, sitting beside him. I know, I whispered. And neither are we. Vanessa's car disappeared down the street, and for a long moment the house felt eerily still. Not peaceful, just paused, like everything was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Dad sat slumped against the cushions, one hand pressed to his forehead. His breathing was unsteady but clearer than it had been earlier. He wasn't confused. He was overwhelmed. I sat beside him, placing a glass of water into his shaking hands. Dad, you okay? He nodded weakly. I didn't want her to come inside, he said. I couldn't take any more. You won't have to, I promised. He looked at me with tired eyes. She hates you now. I exhaled. She doesn't hate me, Dad. He hates the truth. He hates what it means for her. And right now she's scared. He stared at the wall, voice barely a whisper. I caused this. I made all of this happen. I shook my head. You tried your best with what you had. This isn't about blame anymore. This is about fixing what can still be fixed. He closed his eyes. I never wanted my kids to be enemies. Then tell the truth, I said gently. All of it. Everything you meant to tell me that night in the hospital. Everything you've been holding back. His eyes opened again, not confused, not hesitant, but resolute. He took a deep breath. "There's something else about your birth," he said. "Something Vanessa doesn't know. Something no one knows except me and Elaine." My heartbeat stuttered. Elaine, who had stayed strangely quiet through Vanessa's power struggle. Elaine, who carried guilt like a second skin. Elaine, who had insisted she return now at this moment after 20 years of silence. "What truth?" I asked. Dad hesitated, rubbing his trembling hands together. "When you were born, there were complications." My stomach tightened. "Complications?" "Yes," he said, voice trembling. "Your mother almost died. The doctors said she would never have another child again. They told us that if she got pregnant again, it could kill her." I stared at him, breath caught in my throat. "But then," he continued, 2 years later she did get pregnant. With Vanessa." He swallowed hard. "And the pregnancy was dangerous from the first month. The doctor recommended termination." "I remember Elaine saying her family pressured her to terminate," I said. He nodded. "They did. But so did the doctor. Everyone was terrified." "And she refused," I whispered. "Yes," Dad said. "She risked her life to have Vanessa." My skin prickled. "But there's more," he said, voice dropping lower. "Vanessa's birth nearly killed Elaine. He hemorrhaged. She had to be resuscitated twice. It was a miracle she survived." I stared at him, stunned. "When she recovered," he went on, "Elaine bonded with Vanessa so fiercely that she began to resent the adoption, the choice we made with you. She blamed me for pushing her into it. I blamed myself too." My heart twisted painfully. "And that's why you broke?" He nodded slowly. "We broke because your mother thought if she had kept you, she wouldn't have lost pieces of herself. And I thought if I had been stronger, she wouldn't have suffered trying to bring Vanessa into the world." Silence settled like thick fog. Then Dad looked at me with trembling eyes. "But here's the truth Vanessa can't handle," he said. He leaned forward, gripping my hand. "When Vanessa rebuilt her identity around being the daughter who saved our family, she didn't know the truth." I held my breath. "You didn't break our family, Alex," he whispered. "You were never the mistake." His voice wavered. "You were the child who almost cost your mother her life." The room tilted. "But Vanessa," he said, voice cracking, "Vanessa was the child Elaine was willing to die for." The words hit me like ice and fire at the same time. Dad squeezed my hand. "And that's why she can't let you exist," he murmured. "Because if the truth comes out, the story she built her entire life on disappears." I stared at him, the weight of everything he'd said settling into my bones. So that was it. The truth. The weapon. The fracture. The one thing powerful enough to shatter Vanessa's entire plan. The doctor arrived at exactly 2:03 p.m., a soft-spoken man with tired eyes that suggested he had seen far too many families fall apart in living rooms just like this one. He examined Dad carefully, asking questions, checking reflexes, observing memory recall. Dad answered each one clearly. Slowly, yes, but clearly. When the doctor finished, he nodded. "Your father is fully capable of making his own decisions. Stressed, yes. Tired, absolutely. But mentally competent." Relief washed over me in a warm rush. Dad let out a long breath. "Thank you." The doctor packed his things. "I'll file my report immediately." He had just closed the front door when another car pulled into the driveway. Not a silver SUV this time. A black sedan. Vanessa. The engine barely stopped before she jumped out, high heels striking the pavement with sharp, furious rhythm. She looked different. Not angry anymore. Unhinged. Desperate. Someone on the brink of losing everything she had built her identity upon. She didn't knock. She pushed the front door open, storming into the living room. "Call it Ovif," she snapped, pointing at Dad. He shrank back slightly. "Vanessa." "No," she shouted. "Do you hear me? You will revoke this doctor's report. You will tell the court you were confused. You will make me conservator." Her voice cracked with hysteria. Elaine stepped out from the hallway. She'd arrived 10 minutes earlier after my call. "Vanessa, stop." Vanessa spun toward her mother, tears burning in her eyes. "You don't get to tell me anything." Elaine stood firm. "I came here to stop you before you destroy yourself. I am saving this family." Vanessa screamed. "I am this family. I am the daughter who stayed." I am the daughter who saved you. Dad flinched. The words hit him like blows. And now, Vanessa said, eyes blazing as she looked at me, he wants to rewrite everything. For him. Vanessa, I said quietly, please hear me. No. She pointed at me with shaking hands. You weren't there. You weren't the one who kept this family alive when everything fell apart. You weren't the child who was fought for. Silence. Elaine stepped forward, her voice trembling. Vanessa, that's the part you don't understand. Vanessa turned to her, eyes wild. What? Elaine exhaled softly as if releasing 20 years of buried guilt. You weren't the child I fought for. Vanessa blinked. What are you talking about? Elaine swallowed, stepping closer. Your birth nearly killed me. When the doctor said I wouldn't survive another pregnancy, I believed them. And when I became pregnant with you, yes, I fought for you. But not because you saved us. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Mom, stop. No, Elaine whispered. I have to tell you the truth. She reached out gently, but Vanessa pulled away. When you were born, Elaine continued, I didn't have anything left. Physically, emotionally. I loved you, but I was broken. And your father was broken. Because before you, there was Alex. Vanessa turned toward me, shaking her head violently. No. Alex was the child I almost died having, Elaine said softly. Not you. Vanessa froze. Elaine's voice cracked. He was the child I couldn't keep because my body and my life were falling apart. And your father, he blamed himself for everything that happened. The room was unbearably silent. Dad's voice broke the stillness. Vanessa, we didn't tell you because we didn't want you to feel like you weren't enough. Enough. Vanessa whispered, tears streaming. My whole life. I thought I was the reason things got better. You were, Elaine said gently. But not the way you believed. You weren't the replacement. And Alex was never the mistake. Vanessa collapsed into a chair, shaking, staring at the floor as if the entire world had tilted. When she finally looked up, her voice was small. Broken. So then, who am I? I sat beside her, carefully, giving her space but letting her know I wasn't going anywhere. You're our sister, I said softly. Not because of who was first. Not because of who was planned. Because we're both survivors of the same broken story. Vanessa covered her face with trembling hands. Dad leaned forward. And I love you both. Always have. I just didn't know how to hold everything together. For the first time, Vanessa didn't argue. She cried. Not the angry tears from before. Real tears. Painful ones. Healing ones. She finally whispered, I don't want to lose you. I felt something inside me crack open. Not in pain but in recognition. You won't, I said. And for the first time she believed me. The papers were withdrawn that afternoon. The war ended in the place it had begun. Our father's living room. And the truth, once used as a weapon, became the bridge that finally connected us. Not perfectly. Not instantly. But enough. Enough to start again.